But I have every confidence in the world that the president is going to go to meet Putin from a position of strength, that he's going to look out for Europe and Ukrainian needs to end this war honorably, and it's time to end this war honorably. But how we do it will be historical. And I'm confident President Trump will get a good deal for all.
Have you noticed that the talks with Hamas fell apart on the day Macron made the unilateral decision that he's going to recognize a Palestinian state? And then you have other people come forward, other countries say, well, if there's not a ceasefire by September, we're going to recognize a Palestinian state. Well, if I'm Hamas, I basically conclude, let's not do a ceasefire. Right. Because we can be rewarded and we can claim it as a victory. So those messages, while largely symbolic in their minds, actually have made it harder to get peace and harder to achieve a deal with Hamas. They feel emboldened.
This is my video update on this Sunday afternoon, August the 10th, coming to you from Larnaca, Cyprus, a little bit outside Larnaca, Cyprus. Let's talk about some news, and we are going to start things off with the reports that Zelensky has been invited to Alaska, according to NBC, as they have interviewed those anonymous officials familiar with the matter. So according to some White House officials, Zelensky could be invited to Alaska. That's right. That is what NBC News reported yesterday. And then the Washington Post put out an article with statements from White House officials who said that Zelensky has not been invited to Alaska. Hey, Podolyak, what's going on? Am I going to Alaska or not? I don't know, Mr. President. We're still trying to smuggle you into Alaska. Okay, Podolyak, let me know what happens, because I have to pack. All right, NBC News reported the White House is considering inviting Zelensky to Alaska. Trump is set to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska on Friday to discuss a potential ceasefire in Ukraine. And then the Washington Post reported that the White House is only planning on a bilateral meeting, not a trilateral meeting. Reuters reported the same, by the way. They also reported that, according to White House statements, Zelensky is not invited to Alaska. Not yet. Not yet. But who knows? Maybe he will be invited to Alaska. You never know. If you really want to scuttle the bilateral talks between Putin and Trump, if you want to sabotage this, then you get Zelensky to Alaska. That's one way to sabotage the talks. That is what the mainstream media news is trying to do. That is what some deep state officials are trying to do. That is what the Europeans are trying to do. UK, Ukraine, they're all trying to put out the news that Zelensky could be going to Alaska in the hopes that this will sabotage the talks between Putin and Trump. So far, no invite for the Green Goblin. Not yet. So the EU and UK panic. Man, are we seeing a whole lot of panic from the European Union and from the UK. The EU put out a statement, Ursula's office put out a statement saying that the United States and Trump, they need to look after Ukraine's interests as they head into talks with Russia. Ursula's kind of quiet nowadays, isn't she? I think the meeting with Trump in Scotland really damaged her confidence, right? She's not the same tatters Ursula that we've come to know and love. Washing machine chips and refrigerators that are powering up drones. She's very, very quiet. Even the statement from the EU was kind of muted in a way. I was expecting much more from the European Union, from the European Commission. But Macron and Starmer are uniting. They are uniting in their disapproval of this meeting between Trump and Putin. They're very upset that the UK and the European contingent has not been invited to the talks. They're very upset that Zelensky has not been invited to the talks. And they wanted to be at these talks because they want to make sure that there is absolutely no deal that takes place between the United States and Russia. That's why they want to be there, and they want Zelensky to be there because they want to make sure that the Green Goblin spoils any chance of a U.S.-Russia rapprochement. So I'll check this out. Magia Rosadji, Beloyanets Park. This is a park dedicated to Hungary. How cool is that? Very cool. Let's go into the park. Let's check it out. Why not? So no surprise that the resistance is being led by Macron and Starmer, the two big supporters of Project Ukraine. The UK government, they put out a statement on gov.uk, a joint leader statement on peace for Ukraine, where they express their resistance, their disapproval of a US-Russia summit in Alaska. And the signatories to this statement are Macron, Maloney, BlackRock Mertz, Donald Tusk, 008 Starmer, Vandermath, and President Stubb of Finland on peace for Ukraine ahead of President Trump's planned meeting with President Putin. Ukraine issued the same statement on their presidential website, Joint Leaders Statement on Peace for Ukraine. What this statement says is that the negotiations should begin on the contact line. There should be a freeze, and negotiations should begin exactly where the conflict is frozen. A ceasefire and a freeze. That is what they say are that's what the statement says are the requirements to begin some sort of talks with Russia. And of course, Europe is demanding a seat at the table, and Zelensky has to be there as well. Macron actually put out a post on X saying that there can be no talks, no discussions without Ukraine present. Here is what flip-flopper Macron posted on X. I have just spoken again with President Zelensky, as well as with Chancellor Merz and Prime Minister Starmer. We remain determined to support Ukraine, working in a spirit of unity and building on the work undertaken within the framework of the coalition of the willing. Ukraine's future cannot be decided without the Ukrainians, who have been fighting for their freedom and security for over 3 years now. Europeans will also necessarily be part of the solution, as their own security is at stake. The coalition of the willing. Oh man, that coalition of the willing. It goes away, it comes back up again. It goes away, it comes back up again. So the vassals of Europe and the UK, they want to be there with Trump. Why would the United States need the vassals when they're discussing a peace with Russia, rapprochement with Russia. What do they need the vassals there for? They don't. They don't. But we'll see if Trump can stand up to the Europeans. And behind the Europeans and Ukraine, are the neocons. That's the real force that Trump needs to stand up to. I think Trump can stand up to the Europeans, and he could stand up to Zelensky. We've seen him. We've seen him stand up to Zelensky, and we've seen him stand up to the Europeans, to the EU. We saw that last week in Scotland. But with the neocons backing them, Trump has a hard time standing up to Lindsey Graham and the neocons. That's the problem. Zelensky showed up in the White House, insulted the United States, insulted Vance, insulted the White House and the office of the President of the United States, and Trump got upset. But my thinking is that the neocons had a chat with Trump, and he backed down, man. And there was never an apology from Zelensky. Never an apology from Zelensky for that incident. So Congress is not in session, but I imagine in a couple of weeks, Congress will be back in session and back in D.C. and the neocons will really push hard for Trump to back down. And history has showed us that Trump does back down to the neocons. So the panic is big with Zelensky and the EU over this meeting in Alaska. Vance is actually in the UK, and he is hanging out with Lammy, from what I understand. He's spending the weekend at Lammy's country house or something like that. My God. Can you imagine spending a weekend with Lammy, the UK Foreign Secretary? Oh, man. That would be torture. But Vance is doing it, and he's there to tell the Europeans, probably to calm them down, but to tell them what's going on, to fill them in on what the plan is with regards to the August 15th meeting with Putin. To get them in line is actually what Vance is doing, because we know that Vance is not so fond of the Europeans, nor is he afraid of the Europeans. Last time Vance was in Europe, when he was in Germany at the Munich Security Conference, man, did he give an awesome speech in Munich. So if you're going to send anybody to Europe to get the Europeans in line, you would send Vance. But once again, it's not the Europeans, man. It's the neocons. That's the problem. It's the neocons. Anyway, he's in the UK, somewhere in the UK at Lammy's country home. And the Europeans, according to the Wall Street Journal, they have presented, along with Ukraine, they have presented the US and Vance with a counter proposal to the alleged, and it is at this point in time just an alleged speculation of the proposal that Putin made to Witkoff. We don't really know the exact details of that proposal, but the Europeans and Ukraine, they have decided to come up with their own counter proposal, and they presented it to Vance, according to the Wall Street Journal. Ukraine and Europe counter Putin's ceasefire proposal. European powers and Kiev presented their own blueprint for ending the war after Putin demanded territorial concessions and Trump said he'd meet the Russian leader next week. Putin's not demanding territorial concessions. He laid out the terms in June of 2024, and he's just sticking to those terms. And why should he back down from those terms when Russia is clearly winning Everyone has accepted that Russia is winning the conflict. But the counter proposal. What is this counter proposal? Well, as I said a few minutes ago, one of the components of this EU-UK counter proposal, by the way, there are reports saying that Yermak and Umerov were also in the UK at Lamy's residence or his country house, whatever, and they were also meeting face-to-face with Vance. Anyway, one of the components of this counter-proposal is that the ceasefire has to take effect first before any negotiations begin. It has to start at the contact line. Everything should freeze. Everyone in their place should freeze on both sides, no movement at all. An unconditional ceasefire should be implemented. And then the counter proposal talks about how Ukraine should receive rock solid security guarantees. It says that. And it says that any territorial exchange should be reciprocal. I'm not quite sure what they mean by that, because Ukraine is not really holding any territory that Russia, that they can leverage over Russia at this point in time. I mean, maybe during the whole Kursk operation, they could have floated something like that out there. I guess they could say, you know, we'll leave from Kursk if you guys leave from here or there. But I'm not quite sure what they mean by this reciprocal exchange of territory. Let me read you what the Wall Street Journal is saying. 2 European officials familiar with the talks. Always those people familiar with the talks. Man, who are these people? One day I'm going to meet one of these people familiar with the talks. That's my goal in life, is to meet one of these people familiar with the talks. Who is this person? Who are these people? Is it John Bolton? Is it Ben Wallace? Who are these people familiar with the talks that the mainstream media is always quoting? 2 European officials familiar with the talks. These are European officials, okay? So it's not going to be Bolton. Ben Wallace, maybe. Anyway, 2 European officials familiar with the talks told the Wall Street Journal that Europe aims to draw a unified red line with Ukraine, instituting that EU officials should be involved in any potential peace negotiation with Russia, and reiterating that Ukraine's future cannot be discussed without Kiev's participation. The development comes as Trump has suggested he will include Ukraine in future negotiations only after an initial meeting with Putin. The counter-proposal presented to Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Trump's Ukraine envoy Keith Kellogg, and Witkoff also demands that a ceasefire be enacted before further steps are taken, adding that territory can only be exchanged in a reciprocal manner, the news agency reported. The publication said that the counterproposal advocated a strictly reciprocal exchange of territory, and on condition that ironclad security guarantees be provided to Ukraine, including potential NATO membership. The Kremlin has repeatedly described such a scenario as a red line. Basically, the counterproposal is to continue the conflict. That's basically what Ukraine is saying. They haven't really, Zelensky and the Europeans, they haven't really changed their position from a year ago, a year and a half ago. At least the Trump White House, at least with Witkoff and Vance, at least the Trump White House is moving, or at least that part of the Trump White House is moving towards Istanbul Plus, definitely moving towards Istanbul Plus. Unfortunately, you have people like Kellogg, and they mentioned Kellogg in this article, that he was one of the people that was presented this counter-proposal, which I'm sure he is in favor of. He probably wrote the counter-proposal. Well, the counter-proposal is based on the Kellogg freeze plan, but yeah, at least you have parts of the Trump administration that understand that the only outcome, the only favorable outcome for the collective West, for Ukraine even, is to accept Putin's terms and to move towards Istanbul Plus. But Ukraine and the Europeans, they haven't moved 1 centimeter towards Istanbul Plus. As the Russians continue to advance and as they're about to collapse the entire Ukraine defense line in Pokrovsk and Seversk and Kupiansk and all over the Donbass and Kherson, they still insist on an unconditional ceasefire, on entering into NATO. That's what this counterproposal is saying. Ukraine has the right to enter NATO. And then they talk about this reciprocal territory exchange, which makes zero sense. So Dmitriev, the CEO of Russia's foreign investment fund, he said that there's a huge risk of sabotage as these talks in Alaska approach. He said there's going to be a titanic effort to derail the possibility of peace between Russia and the United States. Titanic. Remember last time there was a peace deal in 2022 when we were so close to ending the special military operation. A month into it, Russia, in an act of goodwill, a goodwill gesture, they moved their forces out of the areas around Kiev and Odessa. We were very close to getting a deal done, a very favorable deal for Ukraine. And we remember the big sabotage event that happened, right? Do I need to spell out that name? I probably I can't say that name, probably. My channel will probably get banned if I say the words. The name of that town where there was a provocation, and then the outrage ensued, and Boris flew into Kiev, and the rest is history. Ah, man, beautiful. It's a rocky beach, though. It's a rocky beach. So Dmitriev is saying that there's going to be a big provocation. I agree. The first way to derail the talks. Oh man. The first way to derail these talks is to try and smuggle Zelensky into Alaska. That's the first attempt. If they can't successfully do that, then expect some very, very crazy things to happen. Some very dangerous things to happen in order to sabotage the talks between the U.S. and Russia, because it's not going to end on Friday. This is going to be a pretty long process, I imagine. It's definitely going to take a couple of weeks. Definitely a couple of weeks, maybe even a couple of months. Who knows? If it even goes that long, maybe this will be derailed by Friday, by Saturday. Anyway, that is what Dmitriev said. And Medvedev put out a statement today on Telegram. Let's see how the water is. I have to be careful walking on the stones. So Medvedev posted on Telegram that because Ukraine is running out of soldiers, what they are doing now is they're recruiting mercenaries from the drug cartels. The cartels in Colombia and Medellin, he said, as well as he mentioned Mexico. And Medvedev said that these cartels, they're being trained in all kinds of military operations, including drone warfare. And you know what Medvedev is hinting at? Medvedev is saying, look, when this conflict is over, where are these drug cartels going to turn their attention and their newfound military knowledge towards? Where are they going to turn it towards? The United States, of course. It's going to be a disaster for the U.S., a big-time disaster. Medvedev said on Telegram, as the Euro imbeciles bumble about trying to obstruct America's efforts to help resolve the Ukrainian conflict, the Banderite regime, writhing in its death throes, is frantically recruiting the vilest scum of humanity for the front lines. It has come to the point of bringing in killers from Colombian and Mexican cartels whose names are known worldwide from news reports and crime dramas. The Gulf Clan, Sinaloa, Jalisco New Generation, and others. The recruitment of these thugs is being handled by a company called Segurcol Ltd. From Medellin. He even knows the company's name that is handling all of this. And he goes on and on to talk about the blowback from recruiting the cartels into Ukraine and teaching them how to operate drones and U.S. weaponry, right? NATO U.S. weaponry is what they're being taught to use. What a disaster. What a freaking disaster. Man, Trump, get out of this thing, man. If you're really looking after the best interests of the United States, you need to get out of this, and you need to finally stand up to Lindsey Graham and the neocons. You need to finally stand up to these guys. Otherwise, you're cooked, man. You are cooked. We'll see what will happen. So, Tammy Bruce, she is now the deputy ambassador to the United Nations. Tammy Bruce was the spokesperson for the Department of State. No, the Department of State, right? Yeah, the State Department spokeswoman. So she was at that post, and now she's going to be the deputy ambassador to the UN. This is according to Reuters. Trump nominates State Department spokeswoman Bruce as deputy representative to the UN. And so we're going to be seeing Tammy Bruce in action at the UN because Mike Waltz, who's supposed to be the ambassador to the UN from the United States, remember that? Mike Waltz being appointed as ambassador to the United Nations. That's just been completely sidelined, delayed. So it looks like Tammy Bruce will be in the UN now. That'll be interesting. So what else? What else before we get to a clown world, or should we just get to a clown world? I don't think I have anything else. Fico put out a statement talking about how Ukraine is not going to enter NATO, and basically saying that the EU and the Europeans, they want to sabotage these talks, and we should not let that happen, and the conflict must end. That's pretty much what Fico said. I think he said, one second, let me see if I have it bookmarked. Everybody already knows that Ukraine's NATO membership is impossible. Everyone already knows that the West used Ukraine as an attempt to weaken Russia, which failed, and for which Ukraine will probably have to pay dearly. Remember the old African truth that I love to repeat. It says, when elephants fight or love each other, the grass always suffers. No matter how the elephants' negotiations go on August the 15th, the grass will suffer. In this case, Ukraine. Ukrainian political leaders are somewhat responsible for this situation because they succumbed to the West's persuasion and fully supported the failed Western strategy to harm Russia through all-out support of Ukraine in the military conflict. And then Fico said that, this is a good point that Fico made. He then said that when this war comes to an end, he said, you watch, you're going to see all of these Western leaders and the Western businesses rush back to Russia. He made that point as well. So let's do a clown world. we can finish this video up. Very quick clown world for today. And it has to do with the narrative that Russia is looking to capture Alaska. That's right. That's the narrative now. Putin is not only eyeing all of Europe, but now he is looking at taking over Alaska as well. From the Sunday Times, Russia sold Alaska to the US in 1867, and it is still preying on Vladimir Putin's mind. Oh man. Russia's going to fight a two-front war, a two-front conquest. From the east, it's going to take over Alaska, and from the west, it's going to take over all of Europe. Man, that Putin, he is clever. He is clever. Anyway, that is the video. I will end it there. TheDuran.locals.com. Go to X. Go to Rumble and Telegram. And check out the Duran shop, where you can pick up some merch. Since I'm mentioning Telegram, actually there is a report, check this out. There is news saying that the EU is very close to scanning all private messaging apps. That includes WhatsApp, Telegram, Signal, all the messaging apps. The EU is trying to put legislation together which will allow it to scan all of these applications, even if all the messages that are passing through these applications, even if they are encrypted messages. So I imagine before the encryption, the European Union is going to have the right to go through the messages that are being sent from EU territory or from EU citizens. With 19 European states backing it, the chat control proposal could mandate pre-encryption message scanning on apps like WhatsApp and Signal by October. If something like that goes through, it's going to be impossible to use the messaging apps outside of sending very simple messages like good morning, hello, how are you? It's just going to be impossible to use these apps because the EU is going to be scanning every message that is passing through all of these applications. And you have 19 of the 27 member states that are actually supporting this chat control proposal. The chat control proposal. Oh, God. The European Union, everybody. EU values democracy and rule of law and all of these things, right? EU values in action. We get to scan all of your private messages. Whatever happened to Ursula's private messages with Berla? How about we scan those private messages? Anyone in Europe? Anyone in the Commission, the European Commission or the EU Parliament? Let's make a deal. How about this? Let's make a deal. We'll agree to the chat control proposal if you guys show us Ursula's messages with Berla from Big Pharma. How about that? I don't think so. Right? Right. Anyway, I'm going to end the video there. Take care, everybody.